Now for business updates across the globe, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. We begin in Asia markets mixed, pretty much weighed down by the decision from the Bank of Japan. I think Mr. Ueda is still speaking. Kazuo Ueda, the governor, or he may be done already. But what's happened is the Bank of Japan has essentially said that they will entertain a little bit of flexibility in their. Then this is a little, I don't want to sound too nerdish here, but anyway, YCC is yield curve control. Central banks essentially try to control the maturities across a curve from the short end, mid to the long term in order to control rates. For Japan, it looks like their hand has been forced because of inflation coming in at, I think, 3.3%. Their target is 2%. So they said they're going to entertain a little bit of flexibility. They didn't change their short-term rates. That's still at a negative 0.1. Actually, that 0.1 should be negative. And they said they will conduct, that YCC is yield curve control with greater flexibility. So the language in the from the Bank of Japan is saying, okay, we're going to possibly allow yields on Japanese government bonds to move a little bit. Now, the yield band is kind of like the asymmetric corridor here in Nigeria with your corridor around the monetary policy rates, minus 100 plus 300, plus 100 minus 300 around the MPR. So they are saying that their yield band will be based on references and not rigid limits. So references are going to be picked over rigid limits. Basically, they've been capping these rates. And then the fixed rates JGB buying basically is Japanese government bond buying at 1%. So they're basically allowing it to free up. Now, I kind of plotted a graph just to get an idea of this. And what I should have done was to plot US government bonds and euros and the euro area bonds along with this, because these are very low yields. I mean, the 2-year bond is in negative territory. The 5-year is just 0.15%. Their 10-year bond is actually 0.5. It's actually kind of climbing up because this is at a moment in time. These things trade as we speak. Your 20-year bond is 1.15, 30-year bond is 1.4. So Japan has had ultra loose monetary policy where rates are very, very low. So in plain English, they're basically going to be allowing this to move. Now, what is the impact? Japan's debt to GDP is about 236%, right? So they've got a high debt. However, all these low yields mean that, most of their debt is in local currency, and essentially, when it comes to refinancing, maybe there'll be more of an expense. So what it does to their balance sheets, the impact could be minimal because the rates are still low. Also, what it means is that if for investment overseas, there's something called a carry trade where you compare the yields in one country to another. You might see maybe some repatriation back into Japan if yields are moving up. That's just all it means. It's just more flexibility on the rates. So the ECB still on the rate matter. Lots of rate talk this week. They hiked their rates yesterday, 25 basis points, 3.75. It was expected. They forecast this. They basically, gave forward guidance on this to the markets that they would do this. But Lagarde left the window open to more rate hikes and would not commit to cutting rates anytime soon. We're just getting inflation numbers from France and I think Germany and some other Eurozone countries. I think France came in at 5%. The estimates were at 5.1, and we've got a target of 2% across the Eurozone. So inflation is still sticky, particularly core inflation when you strip out food and energy. So they're going to maintain possibly more rate hikes, but they're going to be very data dependent. US GDP preliminary figures came in. Joe Biden is going to be smiling very much at these figures. Annualized, the second quarter came in at 2.4%. The forecast was for 1.8%. And the first quarter was 2%. So it was from the U.S. Commerce Department. It will probably be revised later as they get more information. But the talk of the U.S. falling into a recession, it's continued. That talk is dying down more and more. The U.S. labor market is still very, very strong. We talk about the need for data here in Nigeria to know how many jobs we're creating. On average, the U.S. has been doing about 250,000 jobs a month for the last, going back as far as you want. So they've been really churning out jobs. The issue, though, is that with a tight labor market, there is still demand for higher wages because of inflationary pressures. And if wage inflation continues to climb and people get higher salaries, they will purchase more goods, which ends up being demand pull inflation that pulls inflation upwards and keeps the Federal Reserve on its rate hike path. So that's what we're seeing there. We come to Africa now. And earnings are now coming out from the number of companies. Second quarter earnings are now with Airtel Africa. This is basically their first quarter. It depends on how their financial calendar, but this is their first quarter numbers. We're seeing an impact on a number of companies with respect to this FX liberalization, where your dollar liabilities have gone up. So they actually had a first quarter loss of $170 million. Their derivative FX loss, so that's your derivatives portion on your foreign exchange, was $471 million. So it really pulled them down into a loss period. So that's Airtel. But look at what the Airtel Nigeria CEO said. He said, we expect the FX reforms to improve liquidity over time, thereby alleviating the challenges faced by international businesses over the last few years associated with accessing US dollars and thus hindering accelerated growth. So for much of the private sector, they are positive, even though, again, and this is something we've said over and over again, that yes, there will be short-term pain, and you're seeing even the companies take this pain, but over the long term, it is hoped that there will be more FX inflows coming into the country. So despite that, it's optimistic. Now, the consumer goods sector, they got hit real bad. So Unilever Nigeria PLC, their second quarter earnings, their gross profit was down 64%. They had an operating loss of 3.2 billion naira. Pre-tax profit was down 72% year on year. If you take a look at the cost breakdown for them, you will see that their revaluation loss was 14.3 billion. So that basically means their dollar liabilities, and I think they take loans from their parent company and still have to get FX for a number of things. That basically led them to a loss. On the flip side, though, and even though 1.75 billion is not the same as 14 billion, their interest on call deposits and bank accounts, basically what this means is the FX in their accounts was revised upwards. So they had a 284% gain on their dollar balances in the accounts that they have. So it's a double-edged, two sides to a coin, where when dollar gets repriced upwards, your liabilities get more expensive, but then your assets also gain as well. Also, I think Guinness Nigeria, they had a loss for the year of 18 billion. Their unrealized FX losses, 45.9 billion naira. Same thing with Nigerian breweries. They also had a loss of after tax of 47.5 billion. Net loss on FX transactions was 85 billion naira. So, but what do Unilever, Guinness, and Nigerian breweries have in common? They're all in the consumer goods sector. The consumer goods sector has faced a lot of challenges because they're dependent on you and I purchasing these goods. So with the disposable income being squeezed, all these companies are import dependent. So volatility in commodity prices has also impacted what they bring into the country for their operations. And then, of course, this FX thing. But this is a one-time thing. So hopefully, subsequently, we hope to see more improvements in their earnings. Now, on the other side, and it just shows the dynamism of the economy and how one decision can impact different companies. MRS is a downstream player in the oil and gas sector. So they have fuel stations and so on. I mean, look at these results. The fuel subsidy removal massively benefited them. And every other company that is in this space, they are one of the first in that space to release their earnings. We'll get other companies. But look at their operating income, 181% jump to 5 billion. You also look at their profits, pre-tax profit. Operating profit was 235% climb. Profit before tax, 72%. Profit after tax, 112. So the fact that the fuel subsidies have been removed, I mean, it's intuitive now. It makes straight up sense. If you've been selling fuel at 185 and now you're allowed to sell at 590 or 617, your profit margins will benefit. And so for shareholders who have who own stocks in those downstream companies, looking ahead, there's a lot of, there's profitability that is forecasted. And so that's just the difference. And then I don't really need to add anything to the ministerial list. Doctor, I thought your take on that list was really good.
So what I'll just say is in all of this, I mean, we're seeing the effect of the forex squeeze. We hope this long-term effect kicks in on time. Yeah, businesses will talk in an optimistic tone, but we hope the long-term effect kicks in, because we keep saying, yes, in the short run, this happens, but we know that the long run does not always come back to the conversation. And that's it. And I'm talking from a point of economic history in this country, because this is not the first time we've had a forex squeeze like this. I'll take you back to 86 when we started SEFM. This was how we had potential for the long run, but it never came to pass. Secondly, in all of these consumer companies that are putting out numbers, what I'm really concerned about is the further squeeze on the purchasing power of the citizenry. And that's where we should be targeting. And the further squeeze on these companies, beverage companies, for instance, I want to speak for, as regards different government policies. So I've been seeing increasingly a policy on sugar.
Yeah.
And all of that, and special taxes on that. The impact also on their business, because you can have both sides to it. The first side to it will be about, the side for health. You want to have healthy population and all of that. But also, the beverage sector employs a lot of people. Yeah. And when you have more taxes, it really hampers their business. So those are also the other parts we should be saying. The purchasing power of the population vis-a-vis these numbers, they also record.
But quickly, the presidency is harmonizing. Zacchaeus Adedeji was on television, the special advisor on revenues, and they are harmonizing taxes. There's also that new tax committee that Tayo is leading from Tayo Oyedele from PwC. So the government is making an active move to harmonize taxes and reduce them. So that needs to be said.
Yeah, that would be excellent, because we've talked about this a number of times in terms of the need to allow businesses thrive without the pressure of multiple taxes. It's great to highlight the gains of organizations or downstream sector like companies like MRS in terms of the fuel subsidy removal. I'd also like to see perhaps an impact on small businesses in terms of this. I don't know if we have data on that, because we keep saying that they should also be at the forefront in terms of conversations where they need palliatives or some cushion in terms of the impact. It would be good to see their numbers as well. So thanks for highlighting that. And I also wanted to draw your attention, just the news about the CAC saying that they register 100,000 businesses for failure to submit their annual returns. In fact, in the report, it says that some companies have failed to submit annual returns for 10 years, for a decade, so you've been operating. And it just shows that a lot of cleanup when it comes to the CAC, and I must commend them, because in recent times, following CAMA 2020, a lot of work has been done to improve that, regulation of businesses and registrations in Nigeria. So just to put that out there, if you have not submitted your annual return, they say they will send notifications to businesses, but please submit so that you're not deregistered by the CAC.
Corporate governance.
3 quick issues. Number one is an update on Coutts & Co.
Oh, yes.
Northwest. Peter Flavel,
the
head of Coutts & Co., had to step down.
Yes.
He says he's taking responsibility. But the chairman of the company and also Porthwaite, the CEO, they have now ordered, an internal investigation of their own. And all of this is as a result of the fallout of that 40-page report on Nigel Farage and concerns about how many other accounts have been closed for political reasons. That's one. Number two, British Gas is making a humongous profit. Their first year half profit is in the region of about 1 billion.
Oh, yes.
At a time when households are having to pay more for gas in the UK. So you are likely to see a lot of agitation, from different directions in that regard. Now, Japan. Interest rate, you said 0.1%.
Yes.
I thought it's minus 0.1%.
That's what I say, minus.
It's minus.
Yeah, it's minus.
0.1%. And their prediction for inflation, they jacked it up to 2.5%. Ultra loose policy. So what they have done, really, is just a little variation.
Yeah.
But the question to ask is, how have the markets responded? And the response has not been quite enthusiastic, particularly from those who support orthodoxy. However, whereas Japan manages to survive, with its ultra-loose policy, you'll find that in the West, the ECB is now saying rates have gone up.
Yeah.
Right? And when they meet again, maybe in September, rates may also go up further. The Bank of England is going to meet on August 3.
Oh, yes.
The Bank of England is also likely to follow the lead of the ECB and also the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank. So what we see here, 2 different approaches. But you orthodox economists always insist that this magical 2%, target rate is what, should prevail. But we've seen different approaches in different parts of the world. But the ultimate objective, of course, is to manage demand so that people don't groan under high prices and too much supply. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Rotus, and it's weekend.
Yes, indeed. Very happy.